to those of you joining us this evening. I can see people streaming in. Just to introduce myself, I'm Crispian Lees. I'm the head of education at Advantage Learn. I also did further studies myself back when I was at high school. At that time, it was called additional mathematics. And then it became advanced program mathematics, and now it's further studies mathematics, or if you're taking the other programs, further studies physics, further studies English, wherever your interest is. So what I'd like to start with this evening is just to give you a bit of an idea of why we hold these further studies guidance webinars. Okay. The whole reason that we have these webinars for our learners and our parents and for others is to help you with career insights, to guide you in terms of where your trajectory might be going. It's also important to connect you to previous alumni, and we're very excited to have Chloe Royston on this evening for this webinar, so that you can get first-hand experience. Well, I suppose not firsthand, but you can chat to previous alumni in terms of how further studies impacted them and where they are now, and what their views are in terms of the journey that they've taken. And then the other thing is we hold these sessions to do our best to connect our further studies learners to scholarship opportunities, for which they're well profiled. We understand that further studies programs are difficult programs. And so it's really important that we always remember the end goal, and we always remember the bigger picture. Even though you might be struggling right now with your further studies, whether you're in grade 10, 11, or 12, as we always say, it's not about the marks. It's about the work ethic that it develops, and it's about the learning that it develops, and it's about the benefits that overflow from further studies in terms of taking part in the further studies program. So without going on too long from my side, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Chloe Royston. I'm just going to, Chloe was at Durban Girls College. She's really is a star further studies alum. She was awarded Dux at the school, achieving 8 distinctions and making the IEB Outstanding Achievers list before matriculating in 2017. After matriculating, she went on to the esteemed Harvard University, which she attended between 2018 and 2022, where she graduated with an AB cum laude in computer science. Her efforts and achievements there earned her the title of John Harvard Scholar, which is only awarded to the top 5% of Harvard learners in their respective classes. And aside from being very sharp and academically inclined, she also really enjoys playing golf and is very much involved in golf as well. Her next step is that she'll be going to Cambridge University to pursue studies further. And I think it's so valuable to get her insights, having studied abroad and having done the further studies programs. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Chloe Royston to talk a bit about her experience. Chloe, over to you, and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. Also, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to listen to my story, and I hope that you found it interesting and get a few takeaways from it. So to start with, as Chris said, I was at Durban Girls College. I'm from Hillcrest in KZN. I started AP Math, which is further studies now, I believe, with Advantage Learn in my grade 10 year. And then I went to Harvard University and studied computer science, and now I'm going to Cambridge in October to do a master's in biotechnology. So obviously the computer science and biotechnology are slightly different, so hopefully I'll be able to explain my path and how I've got there. So firstly, where I am today. So there's a few things that sort of defined, I guess, my life and my interests. So I come from a very medical family. Both my parents are doctors, and extended family, many members are also doctors. So I was around medical talk in the medical world from quite a young age. I was always really interested in it. And then I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 7. So that kind of threw me into the medical world personally. My diagnosis taught me a lot about myself, empathy, the medical world, like I mentioned, and honestly, even numbers. My life kind of revolved around them. So from a young age, like health-wise, but I actually did always really enjoy numbers. I loved math, solving problems. So for me, trying to decide what I wanted to do, I knew these were my two sort of major interests, but I didn't know which path I would end up following or if I'd be able to combine them at all. Sports also played quite an important role in my life. I swam competitively up until grade 10. And then I kept getting ear infections, so I had to stop swimming. And I'd played golf since I was little, so I took up competitive golf at that stage. And I knew from early high school that I definitely wanted to go to the US. Part of it was just because I wanted an experience overseas, internationally. And part of it was also the ability to pursue both academics and sports at such high levels. I think there's not many places that you can do both at the same time. So that was definitely very important to me. So why I decided to take further studies math in high school. So as I said, I really enjoyed math and solving puzzles or problems. I wanted to do something that helped with the SAT preparations, which for those of you that don't know, the SATs are kind of like the NBTs, but they're for the US. So I needed to prep for that. So this was definitely helpful in that. And it's also important for your CV, especially when you're applying to competitive universities. I think anything like this is very helpful. And I also really loved the way that Mrs. Park taught. She was the person who taught when I was doing AP Math. But I'll get back to that later. But the way that she taught was very important, not only for learning the AP Math, but also for how I learned later, and definitely how they even taught at Harvard. So back to kind of my story. So as I said, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was little, and I kind of always knew that I would end up doing something that would help others with type 1 as well. It's definitely a very misunderstood and can be very relentless and time-consuming disease. So I knew that I wanted to make a difference in that regard. I didn't know whether that would be in the medical world as a doctor or what it would be, but I did know that I did want to make a difference. I was always very involved with my management growing up, and the type 1 diabetes technology fascinated me. So from a young age, I was always researching the new technologies and the new research to do with that. But in high school, I came across a group called #WeAreNotWaiting, which is basically a group of people that do open source coding and provide instructions on how to build your own closed loop insulin pump system, or DIY artificial pancreas. So basically what that is it kind of links your insulin pump and a continuous glucose monitor via a computer board. And it kind of increases doses when you need it to, and decreases it when it should. It definitely isn't by any means a cure, but it definitely helps a lot. So because of liability reasons, they can't actually do it for you. You have to do it yourself. So at the end of high school, I followed instructions and learned how to troubleshoot and program my own Intel Edison board to make the closed loop system. And I absolutely found that fascinating, to see something that I could do to make such a massive difference in my day-to-day life, to do with computer science when I'd had no prior experience with CS at all, really like exposed me to computer science. And at that stage, I realized like maybe this is something that I want to do. So I guess that kind of takes me to my first year. So when I got there, like I said, medicine interests me and maths and numbers interested me. So I kind of took everything. So firstly, just take a step back to explain what it is. So when you go to the US, definitely at Harvard and most of the other universities, you do something called a liberal arts degree, which is basically you concentrate in a specific subject, but there's also a lot of other subjects in broad areas that you have to also fulfill. So even if I wanted to study English literature, you still have to do some math classes and vice versa. So did explore a lot of different areas in my first year. I did everything from economics to math to genetics. Funny enough, I didn't actually take computer science my freshman year, but I did in my second year. And the minute that I took that, I knew that I was absolutely fascinated by it. Everyone kind of always told me like, you'll either love it or hate it. So I think that is true, having seen Friends, but I definitely loved it straight away. I found it very intellectually stimulating, and I loved the sort of problem solving aspect of it. So at that stage, I decided to concentrate in computer science. So that is what I did my concentration classes in, but I was able to continue to explore some other areas, like I said. So I was fortunate enough in my final year to get permission to take certain stem cell classes. And I think that's one of the other things that's really great about universities there. They are quite open-minded, and I didn't have any of the molecular and cellular biology requirements to take the stem cell classes in my final year, but speaking to them and explaining my situation and why I was interested in it, they actually let me take the classes. And that kind of opened doors, because once I'd taken one, I was able to take another one with recommendation from the first professor. And I really got exposed to areas that, you know, I don't think I would have been able to if I hadn't been at a place that was so open-minded and had a liberal arts degree where I could explore everything. Because I definitely can say that stem cell research was not something that I would have said I wanted to do when I got there. So that was awesome. And definitely the sort of combination of doing computer science while I was there and then getting exposed to stem cell stuff kind of made me realize that biotechnology was something that I would be interested in. So I always knew that I wanted to do computer science, most likely with the intention of getting into something to do with medical devices. I didn't know how that would look, but I knew that it had helped me in my life, and I would hope to be able to do the same for other people. So that's kind of why I did the CS originally, and it's definitely been very valuable. And a lot of biotechnology will still use it, but it also is a slightly different slant now in terms of being able to do maybe some other wet lab research as well as just the computer science. So I guess while we're on Harvard and my experience there, the sort of different aspects, not only academic, that were also incredible is, like I said, the sports. So I was on the women's golf team and I got to play very high level golf while I was there, which was incredible. We practiced like 6 days a week. So it's definitely an intense program, like sport wise as well, and all the different sports that you get to compete in. We traveled to tournaments. So it was a really great experience being able to do that too. But if sports are not your thing, that is totally fine. There are so many different things that you can do. There's loads of different clubs. And even during COVID, I helped to teach a math class. So you can do something called being a course assistant, where you're basically assisting the professors and you're grading the homeworks and helping to teach. So I did that. I really enjoyed it. So there's music, there's singing, there's stuff for everyone. So I think that's really awesome as well, because it gives you sort of a well-rounded experience, and you get to meet a lot of people, amazing people that way as well. So as I've mentioned previously, the SAT preparation and additional sort of thing to have on your CV was definitely important parts of how further studies helped me in my journey. But what I really think the main thing was how we were taught to think. So basically, it was mentioned many times before I went there, the way Mrs. Park taught. It was emphasized that we need to learn to think. We mustn't just follow things and blindly follow them. We have to understand what we're doing and learn how to problem solve. And professors there told me that time and time again, is that they obviously want you to know the content, but if you forget something, they're not even that concerned. If you forgot one small thing, you can look it up. But if you don't know how to tackle the problem, if you don't know how to, approach something, that's going to be a problem for you. And definitely, I think in computer science, that was like a major thing for me, is that you have to learn and know certain content, but when you have these problems that you have to solve, there's no amount of teaching that someone can do that can help you solve it. You have to know how to think. They have to teach you how to think. And I think that the way that Advantage Learn teaches you, it does teach you that. So that's very, very important, even if you don't really enjoy the content. I was lucky enough that I did, but even if you don't, I still think it's very important. And then where am I today? So basically, I graduated Harvard last year in 2022. I was not 100% sure what I wanted to do afterwards. I knew that I did want to take a bit of time off to play golf. There was 18 months of COVID in the middle of my time there, which unfortunately meant I wasn't able to play. It also kind of disrupted things a lot, being in the wrong time zone, being home. It was definitely a tricky time for everyone. So I knew I wanted a year off before I made any decisions, and having been exposed to the stem cell research in my last year of school, it definitely sort of, changed my path slightly to what I thought I might be doing. And I wanted to have time to think that through and do research and decide, rather than just applying to a program, not knowing what I wanted to do. So I took the time off. I researched very carefully, and I managed to find the Cambridge MPhil in biotechnology, which fitted exactly what I needed perfectly, because I said, like my unique path where I sort of discovered the stem cell research later. I don't have a lot of experience in a lab, like working with wet lab things. I only did a year of that. So having a course that actually teaches you that while you also doing your own project was very important, rather than just doing a research project. So that was vital for me, which I'll come back to, making sure you do your research on your university a bit later, when I talk about going to overseas and figuring out what you want to do. But that was definitely an important part of why I took time off. And I was fortunate enough to get in. So I'll be starting there in October this year, which I'm very excited about. In terms of the future, like I said, I had a pretty unique path. I know that I want to do something to help others with type 1. I do not know exactly what that will look like. I know that it will probably involve either medical devices or research, or theoretically further studying medicine further. Those are all possibilities right now, but I definitely am looking forward to the masters to have an idea, to figure out if that's the area that I'm enjoying, the area that I want to go down, or if just the more pure CS side of the medical devices is what interests me. So that's where I will be going. But for now, just this next year, I'm really looking forward to getting exposed to the people there. And I think that's also something that I didn't really realize when I went there, but when you go, you get exposed to so many things that you couldn't even have thought of, that you don't realize that something's an option until you've spoken to people who do it and they've said to you, why have you considered this? Or, so I think that I'm looking forward to that in my next step. And I think definitely you guys shouldn't worry if you don't know exactly what you want to do. There's so many different possibilities out there, and getting somewhere and meeting people, and that's how you figure out what you want to do. I definitely found that stressful at first, not going there and knowing like this is exactly what I want to do. It's kind of a joke when you go there. Everyone sort of talks about what they want to do, and they're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to law school, I'm going to do that afterwards. And then partway through it, 50% even more of the people who are saying that they want to do something have changed. And they talk about this sort of transformative experience where you come in thinking you're going to do one thing and change to something else during your time. And that's definitely true. Being exposed to the incredible opportunities and incredible people, it gives you that chance. So for you guys who are, some of you may be interested in studying in the US, some of you may be interested in studying in the UK. I only applied to the US as undergrad, so I know that the UK system is a little different for applying. But when I applied to the US, you needed something called subject SATs, which you no longer require. So it's just the normal SAT from my understanding. But from my understanding, most of the universities have this liberal arts degree, which I explained a bit earlier. I think it's a really good system because you can explore so many different areas if you're not sure, like I did. And even if you are sure what you want to do, you still have to explore other areas. And even if it doesn't change what you're interested in, I think it gives you a very good sort of insight into so many different areas that I think it is very important. And to be honest, coming out of school at like 17, 18, knowing what you want to do for the rest of, not necessarily for the rest of your life, but for the next step, it's kind of hard to know, and you haven't really been exposed to things to tell you whether you even enjoy what you think you enjoy. So I really am a big advocate for the liberal arts degree. I think it's a great system. Like I said, there's extracurriculars for everyone, so that's an awesome part of it too. Most universities are really supportive of international students. We had something called FIP, which was Freshman International Program when we arrived, and it was an orientation just for internationals. So we got to meet each other. They took us to do everything from setting up bank accounts, phone accounts, all that stuff that you kind of don't really think of unless you're an international arriving into a foreign country. And it really created a great community of people that you knew before you even went to normal orientation. So most universities are really good with the internationals. Some of you maybe also want to pursue sports at a high level. That's also then a great thing for you to go to the US for. It was an incredible experience, and as I've said multiple times, the opportunities and people you exposed to are really incredible. So many people say that the people make Harvard, and it really is true. The people are amazing, and the professors, you can speak to them. They have office hours. You go and talk to them all the time. You're emailing them. It's you speaking directly to the people that are doing like the major research, which is just such an incredible experience. So my tips for applying, basically you should research a lot. So there are so many different universities to choose from in so many different places with so many different options that you have to kind of know what you're looking for before you start. So I think it's very important to do a lot of research before you even start applying. It can also impact your subject choices. So you should definitely research through that. I'm not sure if the requirements are still the same 5 years later, but when I was there, you definitely had to take physics, you definitely had to take math, not math lit, and you had to take a social studies as well. So you should definitely do your research on that. In terms of starting, you definitely need to start early. I think the essays take a lot of time, a lot of sort of redos. You think it's good and then you change it. It just, because the applications are happening during a time where you often have trials running or finals, it's important to start early so that you don't have too much pressure on you all at the same time. It is a lot, it is worth it, but it is a lot of stuff to do at the same time as trying to do grade 11 or matric. The references and documents also take time. You have to get people to sign things, give you things, get transcripts, etc. And then if you have to do any exam prep or SAT prep, that also obviously takes time, which the further studies definitely helps for. So you should keep doing that if you're interested in the SATs. In terms of applying to different schools, so they have the system in the US called safety schools, middle schools, and reach schools. So you kind of choose, if you're adamant that you want to go over to the US, you kind of choose some schools that you're pretty certain you'll get into, and those are your safety schools. Middle level schools, which are schools that you think you will probably get into as well, but most likely, but you can't guarantee. And then the reach schools are usually like the schools that are really hard to get into, like Ivy Leagues, some of the other really top schools that are not necessarily in the Ivy League category, like they aren't an Ivy League, but they are like the top schools like Stanford, Duke. Those ones you also are usually reach schools. So it's a good idea to apply to a variety of levels if you decide that you really want to go over to the US, rather than like only applying to all the Ivy Leagues if you don't apply to other ones as well. In terms of the extracurriculars, I think, so firstly, the sports, in terms of getting recruited, I was not recruited to play on the golf team. So the system is a little different if you want to be recruited. But you can, and if you are recruited to certain universities, you can get sports scholarships to them. The Ivy Leagues do not do sports scholarships. They do need-based financial aid unrelated to sport or academics. You don't get a scholarship if you go there, but you can get financial support. It's just not based on academic merit or sporting merit. But the sports recruiting usually starts earlier. So by grade 10, 11, you definitely want to be starting to look into that. And then other extracurriculars, they often are looking for people who are doing something else at a high level. But to be honest, you never really know what universities are looking for. They kind of have their own ways, and they look at things and see things in their own way. So it's hard to say what, but I can definitely say a lot of people do. Most people have something else at a high level too, whether it's like singing or debating or sports or something else that interests them. doesn't necessarily have to be like a super, super high achieving thing, but it is definitely something that you're passionate about and you can show that you're passionate about. But don't just do a bunch of extracurriculars all over the place just for the sake of doing it. If you're interested in it, that's great. But I don't think it helps to have like 100 extracurriculars on your CV and not really have one thing that you're fascinated about or one thing that you've achieved highly in. I think it doesn't, basically, if you're interested in all of them and you want to do them, great, but don't do them just because you think it'll look good on the CV. But like I say, it's really hard to say what they're looking for. So can't really advise on that, but definitely those are the sort of things that people talk about them looking at. And yes, that's kind of it from our side. I don't know if anyone has any questions or.
Amazing, Chloe. Thank you. That was fascinating. I was listening intently and taking notes myself. Yeah, it's very, very nice to hear firsthand experience of someone who's, you know, matriculated in South Africa and gone and studied abroad. I know that it is a consideration for many people, and it seems like it's quite a thing to navigate in terms of how to go about getting there. So now we've got an opportunity for questions, everybody. So you can post them in the Q&A, you can post them in the chat, you can put up your hand and we can set your voice channel live, whatever the case may be. But yeah, we're lucky enough to have Chloe here to share her mind and her experience with us. So please, if you have any questions, I'm going to start off with a couple of questions that I had while I was listening. And yeah, I'm gonna get in first here. One thing I'm really interested in is how did you find your level of education when you started versus other first year students? I imagine mostly from the US and Harvard, but I imagine it's quite an international class. How did you find your standard relative to other learners in first year?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of a broad range, to be honest. So I think there's certain school systems that channel you into an area pretty early on. So, for example, a lot of the Eastern European students were like extremely high level math by the time we got there, like stuff that most students would be taking like in their final year at Harvard, they were taking in their first year. So I think there's certain systems that channel you that way, but that's more in the minority that you would be that advanced. I think doing advanced program math was necessary. It placed basically so they have a system where you do an exam before you go there, and it kind of places you into the stream of math you should be in, because like I said, according to the liberal arts degree, everyone has to do a math class, whether you like it or not. So it places you into different ones. With AP math, we could have placed into basically there was math 1A, math 1B. We could have placed into 1B. Sometimes you can start in 21A which is the next one up. It's kind of weird numbers. Don't worry about the numbers, because you've covered a lot of 1B, but no higher than that. So I would say most people, to give an idea, students would start in 1A or 1B. So kind of equivalent, I would say, having done AP math. I think if you hadn't done AP math, you probably would have been starting, or you definitely would have been starting in the first one. In terms of other classes, other areas, I think that like the English, for example, like it really depended on the person. Obviously, it's a very, like writing essays is a very different thing. I think as an international student, Americans write slightly differently. So you take a bit of time to get used to that. We definitely taught in a slightly different way, but nothing major, to be honest. And obviously everyone's coming from different systems in the US anyway. So no one's been at the same school the whole time. So I would say pretty equivalent, but there's obviously outliers of people that have gone through a system that they basically have only done physics and math for like 4 years. And then that obviously advances them.
Fascinating. Thank you. That's great. Lots of questions coming in, so I'm going to hand over to someone else for a chance. I'm going to go to the chat, and I did see someone pop up their hand, but it went back down. So please pop up your hand if you would like to come over voice. Bonolo, let's go to you. How many times did you take the SAT and what was your score each time? That's the first question, and he's got more questions. Let's go with that one first.
Sure. So to be honest, I actually can't remember what my scores were. The math one, I believe, was 780 out of 800. I don't remember what the English one was. It was, I believe, also around 700, a little bit higher. The English one, I definitely found very different. That is the one thing on the SAT. They ask you comprehension questions where the answer is correct or incorrect. It's A, B, C, or D. So that's kind of hard for us, because I know certainly when I was in matric, we were taught nothing's really wrong as long as you explain it. And it's a totally different system. So that definitely was tricky, and it's very time pressured. So I think that it helped writing that so I wrote it a second time for the English, basically. But most people have high SAT scores. Like, I believe it's out of 1600. So most, it's like between 1450 and up, I believe. And they also do take into account whether you've had like coaching for SAT specifically or not. They do ask you that. So a lot of centers in the US, you get taught how to do the SATs. And obviously we don't have that here, or we didn't have it here when I took it. Yeah.
Okay. So just to unravel that a little bit, you spoke of 1450. That's the sum of the scores, right? And
it's
the two tests
different. Yeah. So it's not even necessarily that you got like 10 questions wrong or it's just they add it up a certain way. And if you get this number correct, this number wrong, like most people don't finish the whole score, the whole test. So they take that into account. So I guess the way I would say is the best way of getting an idea of it is to actually take some practice tests, and you can see sort of how you would do and get used to doing it quickly, because it's definitely a rush section. But to be honest, I took it in grade 11 and beginning of matric, so that was like 6.5 years ago, so it's kind of a long time for me. But yeah, the practice tests were helpful. I remember doing a lot of those.
But was I correct in saying that you took the sum of your two scores, because you spoke about a 780 and then about a 700 on the maths and about a 700 on the English, and then you summed them to get
correct.
Okay, and they look at the summed score.
They look at the sum. They look at all of it. Yeah, they look at all of it separately as well. So like I said, for being an international with the English, they know it's different, so it helps, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, great. No,
they can see all your scores, or when I took them, they could see all your scores. So you can't just choose to submit one.
Okay, let's carry on with Bonolo's questions. What schools did you apply to and get into in the US?
So I was actually kind of fortunate. I've done this both times with Harvard and Cambridge. I applied early for both of them. So you can do something called early action, which is you apply, I think, I think it's end of October, around then. I found out beginning of December. And I had only applied to Harvard at that stage. I knew that if I got into Harvard, I would choose Harvard. So I heard in beginning of December that I'd got in. So I chose not to submit any more applications. So I only applied to Harvard, only got into Harvard. I was going to apply to other ones at the end of December when the deadline was, if I didn't get in.
Okay. And was that December of your grade 11 year?
Grade 12 year.
Of your grade 12
it's running, so it's running at the same time. So I was submitting final applications around sort of finals, just before finals. And then you have a bit more time. If you're not doing early action, you can submit it January. So then you finish matric and kind of continue. But it is a commitment, like I say, but definitely worth it if you are able to.
Okay. Bonolo, you've got a whole bunch of questions here. Great stuff. Questions are good. What were your essays about, and more specifically your common app essay? I don't understand that, but maybe you understand that. Common application essay, maybe.
Yeah, so you've obviously done your research on that, which is great. Wonderful. A lot of so they basically want you to do a story, or they want you to write something that is personal to you, that helps you to convey stuff about yourself. So obviously, like I mentioned, the type 1 diabetes, that is a massive part of my life. It's impacted my life massively. So a lot of my essay was based on that. And they don't just want to hear like, oh, I did this. They want to kind of hear how things have made you into the person you are, and kind of a story explaining who you are, what you've achieved, etc., but based on something. So the thing that I used was the diabetes. But people, like I had friends who used, I'm trying to think, they were a big debater and they used that. Sometimes people use sports analogies. Like it can honestly be anything. Just don't make it, my advice would be, don't make it contrived. Like they can see through when it's like something that is actually personal to you and like matters to you versus something that you think they'll like. Don't do that. Rather just write something that comes from you.
Okay, so authentic, that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And character, authenticity and character. And since South Africa's academic year is different from the US, what grade or year were you in when you applied? I think we answered that. Hey, it was in your grade 12 year. You started around finals applying.
So I applied. The deadline was around finals, but I had written SATs already in grade 11, so I had prepped a bit before.
Okay.
Yeah, important to start before. Don't leave it to finals.
And then he finishes off. I know it's a lot of questions. I apologize. I'll be getting load shedding, so I'll be watching the rest of the recording. Okay, Bonolo, well done for asking. Cool. Let's jump to another question. I'm going to try and do it chronologically, to be fair. Great questions, Bonolo. Pete, when do we actually start applying for universities abroad? I think you've touched on that. My understanding is kind of get going at the end of grade 11 already to start figuring out everything that you need to do. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. Nice, Pete. Tom, what can you do to have a better understanding of what a computer science degree would be like, if you would enjoy it or not? Tom is asking.
So that's a hard one. I think that there is an online class that you can do via Harvard called CS50X, I believe it's called CS50 something. And I think it's a free course unless you want the certificate from it, in which case you have to pay, but you can watch the lectures and stuff. It's not the same as being there in person. It's not the same as having people teach you and help you through the coding if you get stuck and talk you through things and things like that. But it definitely, I think, gives you some idea of what it is. Computer science is a really hard one to sort of figure out if you like or not until you're actually sitting there coding things. So even though I love CS50, it did change a lot going through the different like classes as it got harder and harder, and as you do different things like theoretical math and computer science, like it's totally different to anything you've done before, and you don't really know if you like it until you're in it. But that being said, most of my friends who didn't like CS at all could figure that out after they looked at CS50. So I definitely think have a look at that, or any kind of programming things, but definitely get your hands on doing it rather than just watching lectures about it.
Okay. What about doing a short course in robotics at a high school level? Would that give you a good feel for computer science? It has a degree of coding to it.
When I did high school, or at least at Durban Girls College, maybe it was around, robotics wasn't an option.
Available.
So I'm not sure. I have no idea what's in the robotics syllabus.
Yeah.
So if it's got coding in, then that would be great.
100% does. Yes, we ran a robotics academy for a couple of years in partnership with Resolute, and amazing. It was very cool to see what some of the learners came up with. So Tom, I'd consider doing something like, as Chloe's advised, go on and check out the online course, which you can watch the lectures of, but maybe also enroll in a short course. That a short program. There are high school coding programs that you could do to get a sense for it. Great question, Tom. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go over to Eugenie. Let me just find it. How did you manage your time in matric? How did you fit sport, applications, and exams in and still do so well? Did you have any balance in your daily life, or did you work all the time? How many hours did you spend learning and studying? That's it.
So I think the first thing is I think I boxed things pretty well. And in terms of boxing, I mean, like, if I had to focus on an application, I focused on that. And if I had to focus on sport, I focused on that. I definitely took a step back in the sport by the time trials hit. I didn't compete during trials and finals. I chose not to, just like doing the application and doing the finals and trials themselves was a lot. So I chose not to. I still did do sport and practice and things because I found it very important to do other things rather than only studying. I think that's kind of just something you have to figure out for yourself. I think that I definitely know I work better in or in high school, I work better in shorter bursts with the breaks in between. I couldn't just sit and study for like 10 hours. So for me, going out and hitting a few golf balls, like, cleared my mind and I was able to do that. But I think everyone's different. In college, I learned to just sit down and work for 10 hours on coding if I had to. So I think it does really depend. I did have some balance, but I think you definitely have to accept that it is adding a whole extra component onto normal matric. So it is going to be busy, but it is just sort of, a year of your time. And I do really think it's worth it. It is such a incredible experience, but you do have to be aware that it is very time consuming and can be tricky fitting everything in.
Great, Chloe. Thank you. I like that advice of boxing and focusing on certain things. I think there's a lot of research out there that this multitasking is a bit of a myth in terms of progressing, and being able to focus and box your time is a really good strategy. Mika, what was the application process like? What do you think aided your application in order to get into Harvard and Cambridge?
So I did very well academically. I'll start by saying that. I think that that's sort of a given when you're applying to the top universities. Firstly, to take a step back, I'm talking about like the top few universities. Like, if you don't have all A's, that doesn't mean you're not going to be able to go to a university in the US. And if you don't have high A's, it doesn't mean you're not going to be able to go to a good university. But that's why I say the safety middle reach school thing was important if you've decided you really want to go there. In terms of how I personally got in, it's really hard to figure out what they're looking for. It's very difficult. So like I said, a lot of people that were around me did something at a very high level as well as being academic. Everyone is academic that goes there. There's no one that's not. So the way I see it is they kind of look, and if you're academic, you get put into a pool. If you're not, you kind of get thrown out, in the Ivy Leagues at least. And then they kind of sift through and look for things that we don't really know what they're looking for. I think authenticity is a very important one. They interview you. The interviews are very important. They can see if what you've said is true, if you are passionate about things, if you want to make a difference. It's kind of, it's hard to say what they're looking for, other than all you can do is kind of do your best, do things authentically in your essays and all that stuff. And that's honestly really all you can do. But like I say, if you're worried about, like, if you really have decided the US is something you want to do, apply to a wide range of ones. If you just want to apply to like one university, and then if you don't get into that, you would rather be in South Africa, then that's great too. But if the US is important to you, or overseas is important, you should do a range of schools.
Okay, great. Did you use an agency in your application, or did you just do it by yourself, identifying the different institutions and following their processes?
Yeah, I did it by myself. Some people do use agencies. It depends on what. I felt that I think using an agency to figure out what to do if you really are not sure is definitely not a bad thing at all. I think you should put the time into researching the different things either way, because it's important to know for yourself what you're getting into. With the essays, I felt like it would be more authentic if it came from me rather than getting someone else to help and edit it, like an agency, because I know a lot of the agencies do that.
Okay, helpful. Great. Mika, I'm coming back to you, but I'm following chronologically between the chat and the Q&A here. Alexia is asking, can you describe the culture at Harvard in more detail? I've always wanted to go to Harvard, but I've watched many videos that have sort of put me off. I've heard that it is super competitive, even when it comes to getting into clubs, which are supposed to be relaxing and free.
Yeah, so there are some people that do videos and stuff, but don't let any of the stuff you've seen put you off. I think I honestly was worried it would be very cutthroat. It is not, well, I personally found it not cutthroat at all. Everyone is so nice. Like I said, the professors are absolutely incredible. You can access like the people that are like on the front of discovering things. Like personally to me, like I was always fascinated in Professor Doug Melton, who is basically does stem cell research with type 1 diabetes. And he has just sold his company for like millions and millions because they've discovered major stuff. And like I got to speak to him. He came to talk in one of my classes. Like it's just such an incredible experience. And the people themselves are incredible. So much of the work you do is with others. Like all my math classes, they encourage you to work with each other. That's like how you learn. So at the top of our homeworks, we just write who we worked with. And like they didn't, like they wanted you to talk. They even have something called Math Question Center, where there would just be like a room with like one CA, which is the student that has done the course before, who can help you and helps to teach the professor. And they help answer questions that you have at night or whatever, at like 8 till 10 at night. Like you're there and students just come and sit there and you work with each other. Like it really, like there are not a lot of people that are cutthroat there. Like everyone, well, in my experience, I obviously can't speak for everyone. In my experience, everyone was incredible. And it was a really good environment to be in. In terms of the pressure, it is a high pressured environment. Like there's no getting away from that. They often talk about like imposter syndrome. We get a lot of talks about that, where it's like everyone's supposed to be here. We've picked you for a reason. Don't feel like you don't belong. And I think that's more of a danger, is that you feel like everyone else is so smart and you're not. They talk about that a lot with us, which I think is helpful, because I think it is difficult being in an environment with so many people that are A-type, high achieving people, but it didn't really come from the people themselves at all. In terms of the clubs, yes, it's called comping. You do have to, some of them are tricky processes to get into, but I would say that there's always a club that you can get into, and a lot of the comp processes are, you do certain things to get in, but it's not like you're not good enough to get, like anyone will get in who does the requirements, if that makes sense. So like you have to do a bunch of essays for like if you want to be part of the magazine place, and you have to like write certain things or whatever. But if you do that, you're in. There are also clubs that you get picked for, and that's kind of a touchy subject on campus. But yes, there are some clubs like that, but you don't have to be involved in that if you don't want to. There's so many experiences that you don't have to comp for at all that you can be involved in. I didn't personally comp for anything, and I had an incredible time. So
great. That's so insightful. Thank you. Awesome. I'm going to jump back to Mika. He asked, when you got into Harvard, was it only for the liberal arts degree, or would you have to reapply in order to study a major specific degree, or specify your degree?
Okay, so I probably wasn't that clear on that. So basically everyone applies and you get in to Harvard, full stop, or you don't get in. Like you don't have to, you're not in for a specific subject like it works here. And then you do your whole first year and half of your first semester of the second year. And then you declare your concentration. And at that point, you say what you want to do. I said I wanted to do computer science. You can change it after that, as long as you still have enough classes that you can take to fulfill the requirements. So if your concentration requires like 16 classes and you only can take 12 more while you're there, then you can't change your concentration. But if you speak to the different people and they say, no, you can do it, then you're able to change up until pretty late. So for example, if I'd taken computer science and stem cell classes my whole way through, and I declared computer science, and in my final year, I was like, I actually have all the requirements for stem cell, I would like to do that rather, I could have switched. So it's like a very open system, and you're into Harvard, whether you say you in your application that you think you want to do law and you end up doing medicine, or the other way around. They don't mind what you do at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
I missed something. I just want to clarify. So everyone who goes in starts with the liberal arts degree, and then you specialize thereafter.
Yes, you can't. You all end up with a liberal arts degree concentrating in X.
Okay. Okay, cool. It's such a different system. I was in a fixed program in South Africa. I did chemical engineering fixed program. I didn't have to choose anything. I just had to choose the degree, and then they told me what to take, and I did it. And I did my best to fulfill the requirements. So it is a very, very different context there in the States. But yeah, like you said, it's a cool system in that I think you're encouraged to find out a lot about a lot of different domains, and that's really powerful in connecting different domains, taking ideas from this domain to that domain, or whatever the case may be, and not being so too blinkered in your specialization.
Exactly.
Amazing. We got one more question from Eugenie, and then I've got a couple more. Eugenie is asking, what was your matric average, if you're comfortable to share?
To be honest, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was in the mid-90 range. Okay. But I don't, like I say, it feels very important at the time. And I know it's very important at the time and to get in where you want to go. But I promise you don't, like, I really don't remember it. And most of my friends can't remember either. So keep doing your best, but it's not gonna follow you forever.
Fantastic. Okay, amazing. Yeah, there have been so many great questions, so many people so interested in your path. I've got a couple more, if I may, and if there's anyone else in the room with more questions, please post them. I wanted to check in on scholarships. Did you have any experience with scholarships? What was your experience with scholarships into tertiary?
Yeah, so basically, if you're not applying to an Ivy League, you can get scholarships for a variety of things, including academics, I believe, and definitely sports. I am not sure. I think there are like music scholarships and stuff to certain places, but I can't speak to that because I was not ever looking at that. The Ivy Leagues work in a very specific way. So you apply, you get in, it's blind. They don't know if you need help or not. You get in, you don't apply for any scholarships. After that, you submit financial documentation. And if they deem that you need help to go overseas to afford it, then you will get funding that they think you require to like go to the school. They ask for everything, including the cars you drive, the holidays you've gone on, everything. But people who end up really needing it can get full rides. Like there are some students who were in my year that even got allowances for winter coats. So they do fully cover if you need it, but it's not like a need. It's a need. They call it need-based financial aid. It's not a scholarship for merit. So it's sure. But other universities, you do definitely get scholarships for. And if you want to do the sports thing, they usually recruit pretty early on. So often people it's called signing, where you sign with the university you're going with. Often people are signing in end of grade 11, beginning grade 12, sometimes even before then. So you should definitely look at it earlier if you are looking at like a sports-based thing.
Okay. Sure, fascinating. Then thanks so much for sharing your experience on clarity on career path. I mean, you're still figuring it out, as with most people, and I think it's a stumbling block for many people that they think they should know where they want to go already. But as long as you've got a general direction that is following your interests and your passions, and you're engaging and you're doing stuff, you're going to figure it out on the way. So I really appreciate that, because you're a very together individual, and the expectation might be that you know exactly what you want to do, but that's not the case. It's a difficult question to answer, so thanks for sharing that. And then that's everything. Those were all my notes. So thanks so much for answering my questions. Yeah, I don't see any other questions from the Q&A and the chat. Yeah, so Chloe, any final words from you as we close?
Yeah, I think if you guys are interested, you should definitely research, and you should definitely look at doing it. Don't let the extra sort of stuff put you off. I know it is a lot, but it's like 1 year, and it's so incredible afterwards, like when you get there. So definitely, if that's something you want to do, definitely look into it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chloe. And Michaela put this on for us. Find what you love. It might be physics or stem cell science or acting or finance, but don't settle for plan B, the safe plan, until you've tried plan A, even if it might require a miracle. And that's from Drew Forst, the president of Harvard University. Is that the current president of Harvard University?
No, someone else now.
Okay,
But
it's
she was
changed.
there for a long time. Incredible,
Okay.
incredible lady. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. Eugenie is saying, thank you so much for this. It was super helpful. Thank you, Chloe. Everything of the best in the next step of your journey. We will be following, and yeah, thanks so much for sharing everything. To everyone who joined this evening, the recording of the session will be made available. If you have any follow-up questions, reach out to us. And yeah, the recording will be available to share with anyone who might have missed the session and is still interested. So that is everything. So thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Chloe. We're going to close it there.
Thank you,
Cheers,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye.